So Putin have finally unleashed Russian economic weapon on the West after the West threatened to confiscate Russian assets that are worth around $300 billion in a significant escalation of a retaliation measure against the West, who have been termed as unfriendly nation by Russian. Putin had confiscated the asset of some US agriculture holding company. One of them is Agrarian Group, and this company is recognized as one of the top 20 largest owners of agriculture land in Russia, with around 265,000 hectares of fertile farmland in Russia. Basically, this move have sent shockwave in the global agriculture industry and have raised serious concern on the global food security and international trade relations. This action may also pose a threat to the global agriculture supply chain and food production. And every one of us know how important food security is to each and every nation, especially as food prices keep increasing in recent years. Russia will be in a much more stronger position to weaken the global food financial system that is now dominated by the US dollar. With more food supply and agriculture land on her hand, Russia may be able to reduce the usage of the US dollar on the settlement for the global food trade. Trying to build a non-US dollar financial system for the global trade that is backed by oil, natural gas, and massive food supply will be a threat to the US dollar hegemony. I mean, these are all resources that Russians have a lot of them, and these resources are basically those basic commodities that all nations need. And demand for them are kind of inelastic. I mean, no matter what happens, people still need food, need energy, oil and gas, and to run their economic. And we got to understand that this may be just the start of an all-out confiscate fight between the West and Russia. If you look at the data, the Western company have around $280 billion of asset in Russia. So if the American and European went ahead on a full confiscate of Russian $300 billion of asset, Russian would not really be hurt by this move if they decided to fight back by confiscate the Western company asset in Russian, which I mentioned earlier on is around 280 billion. So Russian don't really lose anything. I think the bigger loser are this Western company. So a lot of experts in the West understand the danger of confiscate Russian asset. But it seems that this expert words fall on deaf ear on this Western politician. If Russian and China and most global South nations feel that their US dollar and Euro dollar asset are vulnerable and they no longer trust this US dollar and Euro dollar as a mean of exchange, they may abandon the US dollar and Euro dollar. The American and European may feel the pain of having so much debt in a way they don't now. I mean, this is especially true for the US, who now have more than $34 trillion of debts, and her debt is growing at around $1 trillion every 100 days in recent years. I think we all know that the main reason why the US and European are able to fund their budget deficit easily by selling their bond is that US dollar and Euro dollar are still widely used in the international trade and in strong demand. But all this can change if the majority of the nation decided to actually abandon US dollar and Euro dollar. So retaining the advantage of the reserve currency depend on the Western behavior as someone that people can trust and a neutral custody of other nation asset. If the West start to confiscate or somehow steal other nation money, things can change very fast, and the demand for the US dollar and Euro dollar on the global market may tremendously collapse. And this extra money supply may flow back to the Western nation and flood this Western nation economic with a lot of money supply, and that may create massive inflation problem for the Western domestic market and add on to less demand for the Western debts on the global market. If all this happen, then the Western nation economic may suffer in a way that their people may never experience before. Of course, to everyone's surprise, this may not be what China want in the short run. This is because China export market still depend heavily on the Western domestic market. A massive collapse of the Western currency and economic is something that the China export sector may not hope to see unless China domestic market demand have catch up and her domestic demand is able to absorb all this export that China is now selling to the West. But for Russian, this does not really matter much to Putin, as Russian economy is somehow on her way to a full decouple from the West. So I think we got to understand that consumer can do with less consumer goods which China is exporting to other nations. For example, people can buy less clothes, less furniture, but for things like food and energy are something that consumer will still need during a recession or economic crisis. So China export market may suffer more than Russian if the Western economic face crisis. So China may prefer a weakened Western world order, but I think she may still not want a total collapse yet, at least not so fast. So what I'm trying to highlight here is that with a massive economic size as backing, in the short run, China may still use the US dollar and Euro dollar for quite a significant amount of her international trade until her domestic demand and the global South nation domestic demand catch up to replace the potential loss of the Western market if the Western nation currency and economic collapse. So my conclusion is that the Western world order may not collapse that fast in the short run, at least not as fast as what Putin may hope for, unless the Western politicians do extreme action that collapse their own economic. For example, if the Gaza war or the Ukraine war escalated into a full regional war or worse, a world war, then the Western government may need to print a lot of money to fund all this fight. And that may escalate the collapse of their currency and economic. I mean, this is what happened during World War One and World War Two. The European economic actually suffered, and after World War II, Great British lose her global superpower position to the US. So in short, with the global South and China economic growing stronger as the day go by, and with the Western nation debt increasing at an alarming speed, and as they increase their frequency of weaponizing their currency as an economic weapon on rival nation, all this may weaken or collapse the Western hegemony. And all these are kind of unavoidable in the long run unless the Western politicians change their behavior. For example, there are a lot of experts saying that the Americans still have around 20 years to actually do something on the budget deficit. If the US politicians continue to run massive budget deficit, within 20 years, the US dollar may actually lose her US dollar hegemony, and the US dollar may even collapse under massive debts. So what's your view on Russian confiscate the Western asset? And will the West retaliate by imposing more sanctions and escalate their economic war against Russia? How will all this affect the global economy? Please comment below and share with me. Please subscribe, share and like. Thanks for watching.